Ahora ya, ¿no?
Ok, se empezó.
¿La cámara?
Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So it's a great honor for us to welcome Professor Annamaria Lusardi as one of the keynote speakers of this conference.
One second.
No? It's a recording. Okay, so Annamaria Lusardi is one of the keynote speakers of this conference. Professor Lusardi is one of the world's leading scholars in the field of financial literacy and financial education. She's currently a senior fellow at the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research and director of the Initiative for Financial Decision Making at Stanford University. She's also professor of finance by courtesy at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. Throughout her career, Professor Lusardi has made an extraordinary contribution to our understanding of how financial knowledge affects individual decisions, economic well-being, and public policy. She is the founder and academic director of the Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center and the founding editor of the Journal of Financial Literacy and Wellbeing. She's one of the most cited authors in the field of financial literacy. Her work has been published in leading journals, including the American Economic Review and the Journal of Political Economy. She has shaped financial education policy around the world, including her role directing Italy's National Financial Education Strategy. Today, she will deliver a lecture entitled The Importance of Financial Literacy, Evidence from Many Years of Data. We are very honored to have her with us, and we are very much looking forward to her presentation. Please join me in warmly welcoming Professor Annamaria Lusardi.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this invitation. I am delighted to be here today to talk about financial literacy. I am going to talk about financial literacy around the world, but also try to focus on Spain and Spain in particular. So let me actually start. And I hope you can see my presentation. Going to so what I'm going to do is provide an overview of some of the work that I've been doing and also of looking at the evidence across many years of data. Just an outline of the presentation, and what I'm going to say is, first of all, we are going to start with measurement because we need to measure in order to understand, for example, a problem. As the presentation or as I mentioned was mentioned earlier, I'm also going to show that financial literacy is important because it can be linked to behavior. And I try to answer the questions whether financial education works, and finally look at the implication of all of this research, both for teaching and for policy. Just as an overview of the finding already from the beginning, we have a very detailed measure of financial literacy. In fact, a short and a long measure that you can use also in your own work. What we see is that there are many changes happening, but financial literacy is not keeping up, is not moving, and is not improving. That's one of the main message of the presentation. And unfortunately, because it matters, we need to change these statistics, and teaching personal finance is one way in which this can be done. And I do think that academics have an important role to play when it comes to financial literacy. And this is why I was delighted to also be invited to speak to many more academics around the world. So let me just start to describe why financial literacy is so important today and why are we focusing so much on it. And this has very much to do with the fact that there are many changes happening. One is certainly the change in the pension system that put us more in charge of this decision. But many other changes are important also in the labor market. For example, the gig economy, the focus on STEMs, changes in the labor market and in financial market, more financial products that are more complex. Fintech and artificial intelligence are, of course, important. And again, we see everywhere an increase in risk. These changes make financial decision more complex, and we cannot just use common sense anymore. And the decision we were making in the past are difficult now, and we need a more rigorous approach to financial decision making. That's really what the essence of this presentation as well will be today. So I wanted to tell you that about 20 years or so ago, I actually started considering these questions of whether people are well equipped to make financial decisions. And the importance of looking at these decisions, something that not only the Financial Times wrote about eventually, but also the Financial Times itself now as an initiative to improve financial literacy, in particular among young people. So why this is the case? Let me start with the measure of financial literacy that I designed several years ago, so you can actually see what's the situation. So together with Olivia Mitchell, I designed these 3 questions measuring financial literacy. I'm going to report here without really reading the questions, but I wanted to show, first of all, just how simple the questions have been to measure how much people know. So what did we measure? We measure whether people have a capacity to do a 2% calculation in the context of interest rate. So it's like basic numeracy. We look at the knowledge of inflation. We look at the knowledge of risk diversifications. So we are looking at really these basic concepts at the basis of every financial decision, and certainly very simple. Actually, I have to say that this question were an accident, meaning we wanted to measure financial literacy with an extensive measure, but we were told we only had 3 questions. So we spent more than a year trying to design these questions because we couldn't get them wrong if we only had 3. But what we thought was a constraint turned out to be an advantage, because we could add questions, 3 in particular, to many surveys, not just in the US, but also around the world. So let me turn now to show you what the evidence was like in one of the first data set we were able to add this question to and measure financial literacy among the US. And what I want to show you here, it was our original publications that actually show that when you look at the US itself, we found the striking finding that very few people, frankly, can do this, can answer this question, even though they are so basics. And only when we look, for example, at risk, we found that actually this is the topic that people know the least and where we get a lot of do not know answer. As you have seen, the questions have are multiple choices. So again, they should be even simpler to answer. When we look at the proportion of people who can answer all of these questions together, we find in the US, only 1/3 of the population is financially literate. So you cannot take financial literacy for granted, even in the country with the most developed financial markets. We were able, again, because they were only actually 3, to add these questions basically in many, many countries around the world. And we have been able to work with researchers around the world actually to measure financial literacy, not just in the US, but in other countries as well. We have called this project Flat World because when it comes to financial literacy, frankly, the world is flat, meaning we find the very same finding across the other countries. So even if you look at the G7 countries, we don't see high level of financial literacy. We see everywhere that risk is what people know the least. And we saw this very high proportion of do not know answer, which I'm going to tell you in a moment why they are so important. So more recently, we were able again to add more countries to our analysis and also to cover now not just Europe, but also Latin America, Asia, and so on, and also to do this survey again in the same countries, in some of the same countries that we had originally covered. And I wanted to show you this special issue of the Journal of Financial Literacy and Wellbeing, also because now, as was mentioned earlier, we have a journal dedicated to financial literacy. So if you are working on this topic, you have also a journal where to submit to. And unfortunately, what we see is that we continue to have the same findings, and also we don't see improvement in financial literacy over time. Okay, so that's potentially very striking, but that's what I wanted to document. If we look at what are the vulnerable groups, there are several groups that emerge, and I'm going to focus in particularly on two throughout my presentation. One are the young, and second are women, and this is because they are also a very important group of the population. So first of all, we wrote a paper just looking at the young. And what we found in the US, when we look at data from the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth, where we can follow young people over time, first of all, we again document that financial literacy is very low among the young, but it is in particular concentrated basically among white, male, from college-educated families. In other words, what we do find is that financial literacy is learned at the dinner table. And so it might be another factor of inequality. The people who are financially literate, in particular among the young, are the privileged group of the population, the one who can rely on their family to learn from. And this is, for example, why it might be important to give access to financial education to a much larger group of the population. The second thing we focus on are this do not know answer. And one of the things we saw throughout the countries is that there is a very persistent gender gap. I've shown you here already in the US, but it's actually true among other countries as well. What we saw as well is that one of the reasons for this gender gap is that women are disproportionately more likely to answer with I do not know. So we did this experiment using data from the Dutch Central Bank. If you have followed some of our work, we have worked a lot with the Central Bank in the Netherlands, who has been able to pilot many questions and many initiatives on financial literacy and financial education. So what we did, we asked the big three in the same way, and then we took away the do not know option in a sense, and we force people to answer. And what we found is that women actually did know the answer to the financial literacy questions, but they were, in a sense, not confident in their answer. So this allows us actually to pin down how much of the gender difference in financial literacy is due to confidence. And we estimated that as much as 1/3 of the gender gap is actually due to confidence, not just to knowledge. And we also found that both knowledge and confidence is important for participating in the stock market. We call this paper Fearless Woman because to remind of Fearless Girl, a statue that was put in front of Wall Street to signify as well how important this confidence is. And indeed, we find evidence that actually confidence does matter. So what we also did is develop and try to add financial literacy into a theoretical model of savings. And here we are trying to answer the questions, why is financial literacy important and why are people wanting to be financially literate? And so we design, in a sense, a model which actually show that financial literacy can be important indeed because people can have better access to financial markets, but there are also costs of acquiring financial literacy. So we come up basically with a model that shows that also financial literacy is a decision variable, and therefore, in a sense, what's the optimal level of financial literacy. But most importantly, we document that financial literacy is very important. It can explain from 30 to 40% of wealth inequality close to retirement. So, the paper wants to show you can actually you can add financial literacy now in a theoretical model, and it certainly matters. Financial literacy is very important and consequential. Now, if you want to read an overview of this work, we have written a short summary in the Journal of Economic Perspective, and we have another paper coming out in the Annual Review of Financial Economics. This is just if you want to have an overview of what has happened to financial literacy over time. And also we have validated the questions, so you can use them with confidence. And as you have seen so far, what about Spain? Right? We have not been able, in a sense, to add these questions in a national survey in Spain. But fortunately, more recently, we have been able to work with the European Central Bank in their survey of expectation, in the expectation survey. They actually have covered 11 countries in Europe, and this country included Spain. And what I've reported here is the evidence on Spain. And as you can see, Spain is one of the countries with the lowest level of financial literacy in Europe. So when we look at the evidence in Spain versus the other 11 countries, and also with respect to, for example, Austria, which is the country with the highest level of financial literacy, according to this estimate, we do see that in Spain, we have similar result in a sense as the US, meaning risk is the topic that people know the least. And as you can see here, only about 40% of people in Spain are financially literate. So I hope that there will be a researcher in Spain that can actually look more at this evidence, and we would be happy to publish a paper looking basically at the evidence of financial literacy in Spain as well. Certainly, it seems an area that requires some research, potentially also to be able to improve the statistics in Europe and in Spain itself. Now, as you can imagine, 3 questions are indeed very little to measure financial literacy, but actually started in 2017, we have been able to collaborate with the TIA Institute, which is one of the research arm of TIA, which is a big pension fund in the US, managing actually the pension of teachers of the education industry and of the universities as well. And we have been collecting data each January on financial literacy, but on a very extensive measure. And each year, in addition, we have been able to collect always new data, new questions, and so on. So, we have a lot of information available now, even though in my presentation, I'm going to focus in particularly just on financial literacy. So, I wanted to show you here what we measure is a personal finance knowledge. So we call it the personal finance index. We have as many as 28 questions to measure that, basically 3 to 4 questions for every area of financial decision making. And we have a large sample, which we have been increasing over time. So we have also been able to focus not just on the total population, but also on specific groups. As you can see, each year we focus on a specific group or on a specific topic. And this year marked the 10-year anniversary. And this is why we wanted also to show you this data. As I've mentioned, we have as many as 28 questions now to measure financial literacy, 3 to 4 questions on any of these 8 topics, which are the topic taken from the national standard for financial literacy. So now we have a very, very extended measure to understand what is it that people know and do not know when it comes to financial decision making. So what we found is unfortunately very similar to what is the evidence for the big three, meaning that, when you look at financial literacy, people only can answer half of the questions. And, in the US, if you have a test, in fact, I'm teaching personal finance now, and if my student were to only be able to answer half of the question in a 28 question exam, they would actually get an F. And this is probably the grade we can give to the knowledge so far. The other important findings, and we saw this also with the big three, is that unfortunately financial literacy is not improving. Over time, if any, is going in the wrong direction. So what you'll see as well is that the group of the population that is not even able to answer 7 of the 28 questions is really increasing over time. And that's another reason why financial literacy is not improving. What are the topics that people know the most and the least? And again, we find evidence similar to the big three, meaning that the topic that people know the least are investing, insuring, comprehending risk, which are unfortunately very important topics, because we all need to grow our wealth, we all need to insure, we all need to understand the risk around us. And yet again, we find the same finding that risk is indeed a complex topic, something that we have also seen when we look at our simple big three. Now, yet again, I wanted to show you the young and focus on the young, because this is also the group of the population that we deal with at universities. And not only the young are the one who know the least, but there is a high proportion of the young that doesn't even know 7 of these 28 questions, meaning knowledge among the young is indeed lacking, is indeed very limited. Now, I want to now turn and do another important and show you another finding, which is, but does all of this knowledge matter? Even though it is low, is it linked to behavior? And I'm going to show you one of the simplest behavior, meaning are people putting money aside to provide for bad events? Are people making provisions to insure against shocks? One of the difficulties of collecting data on wealth is that you need a lot of questions to measure wealth, probably more than 20 questions. What we have found here, and this is a project I did with Peter Tufano when I visited Harvard Business School, we actually have found a way to measure whether people have precautionary saving or they have resources to deal with shock with a very simple questions. It's actually a multifaceted questions. I don't have time to explain the methodology about it, but I wanted to show you how we classify people as financially fragile. We basically ask if they could come up with resources to face a $2,000 shock. The $2,000 is just to measure a mid-size shock, and whether they have the capacity to come up with resources. You don't have necessarily to have them in the bank account or so on, but can you access these resources? And this is actually, with one question, we can capture, in a sense, the state of the balance sheet, meaning we can capture whether people have asset or whether they are highly leveraged. So we were able, with just one question, to basically capture this measure of financial fragility. And what we found is that if you look at financial fragility over time, it is actually relatively high in the US. It was very high in 2009 when we first designed this question, which was on the cusp of the financial crisis, where you can see that 1 in 2 Americans, were not have been able to face a mid-sized shocks. This is just to tell you how much America was hurting after the financial crisis. As the economy got better, actually this financial fragility went down, but in January 2020, and this is actually just before the start of the pandemic, you could see that many people would not have been able to face a small shock, let alone a big one like the pandemic. And what we can see now is about 1/3 of the population is continue to be financially literate, even when the economy does well. And in 2026, even more than 30% are financially fragile. Now, when we link financial literacy to financial fragility, just even in the simple correlation, we see a very strong relationship between financial literacy and financial fragility. And you might think, well, that's due to the fact that people have low income, low educations, and so on. In fact, when we control for all of these other characteristics that can lead to financial fragility, including actually education, we find that financial literacy has an effect above and beyond all of these additional reason potentially or determinants of financial fragility. And as you can see here, using different measure, and fortunately we have also a measure in our survey, not just of whether people are financially literate, but whether they were exposed to financial education. So we ask whether they went to a school or to a workplace that offered financial education, not whether they attended the financial education, to get a more exogenous measure of financial literacy and financial exposure to financial literacy. And as you can see here as well, when we use this measure, it is related to financial fragility, and it is also economically important. We have done a lot of analysis, a lot of robustness check. We have tried to instrument to get a better and more exogenous measure of financial literacy. And we do find, they continue to find, that indeed, even if you look at the simplest measure of financial literacy, if you look at a simple financial decision making, such as are people, making provision for the winter, right? Are people trying to have resources to face a shock? Actually, even that simple decision is linked to financial literacy. We have written a paper that looks at this during the pandemic, and we found that indeed financial literacy is very linked to financial fragility before, during the pandemic, and frankly, after the pandemic. So this is a finding that continues to be there. But we also found that financial literacy is linked to many other behavior, is linked to whether people carry too much debt, and debt management is linked to saving, is linked to planning for retirement, is linked to wealth. So certainly has a strong impact on behavior. More recently, we have been able to actually come down from 28 questions to a measure of 8 questions. No one can probably use as many as 28 questions as we did. And also these questions are proprietary. But now, after the 10 years, and now that we have so much data in which we can actually look at our measure, we have come up with a shorter index for financial literacy using these 28 questions, and we have a measure that actually really correlate with this more extensive measure. These are actually the 8 questions. I'm not going to read them, but I will make, I wanted to make them available. I will send this presentation afterwards. So if you want to use an extensive measure of financial literacy, for example, in your own class or in your own work, now these questions are available, and we have also done a kind of a technical guide to be able to use the data, because we are also making the data available for those who would like to study this topic and use our questions. So let me now turn to the other part of the presentation, which is, given these findings, what are the implications, for example, both for teaching and for policy? And let me turn first to teaching, because clearly, we have the young in our classroom, and this is a topic that we can actually teach them, and this is a scientific topic that we can use right in our courses. The first question, though, I want to ask, even though I've shown you some evidence already that financial education, for example, is able to be linked to financial fragility, but does financial education work? When we try to answer this question, I have to tell you, it was a very difficult question, because when we look at the evidence just on financial fragility, on financial education, the number of papers on this topic had exploded. So we could not just do a literature review. What we did instead was a meta-analysis, and we cover as many as 33 countries, focusing on the most rigorous evaluation of financial education, which is the randomized control trials. And in our analysis of all these many programs, we found that not only financial education works, but it is cost effective. And it also works not just among the young, but also among the adult population. So if you are skeptical about the effectiveness of financial education, actually the evidence across country tells a different story. It tells that financial education is effective, and we can actually do program across very different groups, as we have seen done across the world. So we have started to teach personal finance. I started teaching personal finance since 2011. And at Stanford, personal finance started to be taught in 2020. And it is now one of the most popular elective at Stanford. We actually offer it several times a year. In fact, I'm teaching this summer. We have taught in the spring, and we also taught a course in the winter term. And we are very happy to share our material, our lecture note, all of the material for the course, if you are interested in teaching this course as well. The course, as you can imagine, is very data-driven and is very research-driven. We use the Personal Finance Index to design the course, and also to document many of the financial decision making we cover in our course, and to motivate why we are doing this course. And we are also assessing whether this course on personal finance is effective by actually collaborating with 2 other very large universities in the US, which have a very large number of students. I have to say this is a course that is now being taught in many other universities as well. So what are the topics we cover? These are the topics. Basically we start with basic accounting for personal finance. We then cover the life cycle model of saving under uncertainty, and basically the saving for retirement. We talk about debt management and also the FICO score. We talk about buying a house and other durable goods. We're talking about investing in education before we talk about investing in financial markets. And then we talk about for example, pension decisions, all of the advantages offered by tax favor assets, and also the employer matches. In the US, there is a big incentive provided by employers in their pension plans, and there are also a lot of tax advantages in saving for retirement. And finally, we cover insurance and retirement planning. And again, we are very happy to share our slides and our material if you are interested in teaching this course. We indeed have built a network of teachers that are interested in teaching this topic. This is all the people we brought to Stanford a couple of years ago, because every year we organize a teaching personal finance conference. We have it in person every year, every other year, and online as well. And this year it is in person. It is scheduled on Friday, September 25. And if you are interested in attending, we'll be very happy to send you an invitation. And this year, for the first time, we are also having personal finance in other countries as well, and showing and bringing teachers from other countries and describing and having them talk about their own teaching of this topic. As you can imagine, some of the topic can vary across countries, but overall, like the main topics are the same. We are going to have speaker, for example, from Portugal, who has a very big program in teaching personal finance to the whole population, by the way. And also Italy, we are bringing the rector of the Catholic University in Milan and many other speakers as well. And this is more information about this conference if you are interested. Now, let me turn now to policy and programs, because this research has also an implication for policy. As it was mentioned, I chair the Financial Education Committee in Italy, in charge of designing a national strategy for financial literacy. Here I am actually with our President Mattarella, describing the work that we have done in Italy. And we were able to support a law that made financial education mandatory in school in Italy, starting with elementary education. We also did a national campaign about financial literacy, and we have evaluating the effectiveness of that campaign as well. We have been working with central bankers around the world, and we have been talking about financial literacy, for example, at one of their meetings in Europe with all of the finance minister and central bank governors. And more recently, Christine Lagarde is actually very keen in focusing on financial literacy, in particular to close the gender gap, and has set up a network of central bank, in a sense, the people at the central bank who do financial education, to actually work together to try to close this gender gap and also improve financial literacy. And we have a paper that actually shows that financial literacy is very important for the transmission of monetary policy. Well, I was also part of the committee that was evaluating financial education activity at the Bank of Spain. This is the report we wrote. You can find on the Bank of Spain website, and I welcome you to kind of read it. We have proposed a lot of activities for the Bank of Spain, and we hope that the Bank of Spain can play an important role in improving or doing more financial education in Spain. And also we are happy to work with the World Economic Forum, which has now a global future council dedicated to financial literacy and to financial education. We have done a lot of activity, and we have an online forum with central banker coming up in October. It will be an online meeting. If I want to mention some of the research questions that are still there to be answered. Certainly, gender differences. How can we explain gender difference in financial literacy? No one has been able to fully understand, why there is this gender difference around the world. We want to clearly understand why financial education, how to make financial education even more cost effective and effective. What are the best strategy to make financial education work, in particular among the adult population? I think for the young, we can have financial education in school and we can reach a lot of the young. So not just the privileged group have access to financial education. And again, how to reach the vulnerable groups, for example, also those with low income and low education, is an important question, as it is how to assess the cost of financial illiteracy. Often people tell me that financial education is expensive, but so is financial illiteracy. So it's important to document the cost of this financial literacy. And also, I think as we all live longer and the new generation live longer, it's certainly very important to build wealth early in life. As you might know, here in the US, Trump accounts just launched. In fact, last July 4th, what the Trump account are, actually the administration is giving $1,000 to all of the children born between 2025 and 2028. So this is one way, seed money, to be able to build wealth early in life. Well, with an 8% interest rate, if this $1,000 is held for 60 years, it would actually multiply 100 times. So yet again, it might be important indeed to start thinking of building a wealth very early in life. And of course, what is also important is what are the macro implications of financial illiteracy. So let me conclude, financial literacy is a rapidly growing research field with a lot of research opportunity. There is also an academic journal where it's possible to publish research. It's a topic which is relevant not just for academia, but also for policymakers. You can also teach, if you were too interested in this topic, you can also teach a course in college, and we are very happy to share our material as well. As you know, also, financial literacy has become an official field of study with its own GL code, which is G53. And we have also set up a network of researchers working on financial literacy and personal finance. We call it the G53 network, to name the GL code. We have so far many researchers working together around the world on this topic. So let me conclude. I've given you a lot of probably data and statistics, but a lot of people ask me, what financial literacy really is. And so I want to leave you with this image that, in a sense, try to express what I think is financial literacy. There are many important components of an ecosystem, but I think financial literacy is literally like water in an ecosystem. It is needed to grow and flourish. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to tell you about our initiative. And for many information, you can actually go to our website where we provide a lot more information about what we do and our research. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, Annamaria. It was a fantastic speech. And so we have now some minutes for your questions or suggestions that you have. So anyone has any question?
To start.
Yes. Okay.
Can you hear me? No, my question.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the amount of data that you have group that's showing us. So for me, it was wonderful to know that there are more and more sources of information. My question is, so far, I was always working with PISA data on finance and also with the PIAC. So all this data have anything to do with your data? I mean, you know what I mean? The finding of the both sources is similar. Have you ever played with the PISA financial data set? Thank you.
Yeah, so first of all, I wanted to tell you that, since 2012, we have financial literacy in PISA as well, right? So, and this is great. I actually led the group of experts that designed the financial literacy measure in PISA. So in PISA, we measure financial literacy with 40 questions. So we have a lot of questions there. You probably don't need 40 questions, but it's good to have as many as 40 questions to measure financial literacy. And, but this is very much focused on 15 years old. And what I can tell you in that evidence, and I think what is important, is that we find very similar findings in the adult population. So, for example, one of the findings which I find, always heartbreaking a little bit, right, when you look at PISA data, is that, the people, basically the young people who are financially literate are always those from high income families, right, or wealthy families. And this is actually true across all of the countries. So yet again, if we don't have financial literacy in school, right, the young people acquire financial literacy because of their rich parents who can teach them about these topics. The other interesting things, and this is not true in many countries because also of the methodology we have used to measure financial literacy. In PISA, we actually ask students to answer a question in their own words. So this actually is very important to limit gender difference in financial literacy, right? Because as you have seen, if you give a do not know option, women are more likely to choose it. And they choose it when they are not 100% sure of the answer. Okay? So we see that indeed in many countries we do not have a gender difference in financial literacy, but in a few countries, and unfortunately Italy is one of them. So in Italy we see a gender difference even with this methodology, right, which actually allows to take away this tendency or like this lack of confidence among girls, but we do see, gender differences already emerging at that early age. And this is true in the new survey, in the latest wave, we see gender difference in other countries as well. So I think this gender difference is a truly important topic to study. And, it seems to form so early in life. So, the PISA data is indeed a very useful data to study. I think the disadvantage is that we don't have a lot of data on behavior in PISA. So you would be limited in a sense to study mostly knowledge, but not as much the link to behavior.
Thank you.
Any other question? Yes, well, we have some students from all the countries, and there are at least two from Italy. So we have a question from one Italian professor.
It's better to intervene early, but I was wondering whether you have an idea which period would be best to intervene and to increase financial literacy, like at what age, and how would you handle it?
Yeah. I actually, this is a very important question. I actually think we need to teach money as early as possible. I would say as soon as the tooth fairy comes, right? If you have such such person in Spain as well. In Italy, we have la fata del dentino, right? That gives you money once the first tooth, comes out. So I say that because I've actually interviewed a lot of famous finance people, and one feature that always come up is that if you ask any finance people about their experience or why they chose finance, they always refer to an event in their childhood. So, for example, I have interviewed John Rogers, which is the founder of Ariel Investment, which is one of the big financial firm in the US, and he was also the financial advisor of President Obama. And the story he tells is that when he was young, his father, as a Christmas gift, gave him stocks. So he was only 12 years old, right? And this actually what made him interest in stock and the stock market. By the way, John Rogers is an African American. He was from an educated family, but probably not the person you would think would start a financial firm and become one of the most important financial firm in Wall Street, right? And in many other cases as well. So to give maybe a shorter answer, I actually think it's very important to start as early as possible, starting with elementary education. And this is why we push a law in Italy to start as early as possible. In the US, state have made financial education mandatory in high school, and high school might already be too late. So I think the earlier we start, the better.
We have another questions.
So I don't know if she can hear me. Can you hear me? No?
Yes.
Okay. So I was wondering if you had any insights on the difference between those who are financially illiterate and they do something about it rather than just I know how to manage my finances, and those who are at the higher end of the distribution when I just manage my finances, but I don't stop there. I also do a more risky financial activities such as investing, etc. So have you looked at the difference between those two? Because they're both financially literate, but they have different outcomes in terms of the financial, let's say, resilience, fragility, capacity, etc.
Yes, very much so. So, this is why, for example, we don't focus only on investing, right? So we have looked at, for example, investing decision, but this is why, for example, I've looked at even some very simple decision, right? Do you have precautionary savings? Everybody, in a sense, should have precautionary saving. I've looked at debt and debt management. So, decision that everybody in every income group, in a sense, should be doing to study the effect of financial literacy. So we have very much looked across the spectrum. But I also have to say, at the moment, I actually think because of the changes in the economy, in fact, I think everybody should invest. Everybody should learn to invest, because if you don't, you are not going to be able to grow your wealth. And certainly you are not going to be able to grow your wealth beyond inflation. And in our evidence, actually, financial literacy is a very important determinant, particularly of these very complex decisions, right? For example, investing in the market, is complex, right? But even planning for retirement today is complex. So that's really the main point we wanted to say. We are facing extremely complex financial decision, but in reality, people don't even know what an interest rate is. They cannot do a 2% calculation. So that's why I always say financial illiteracy is like reading and writing today, right? You need that, you don't need to be, a financial expert. It's not that we want people to become, Warren Buffett, one of these most famous investors in the US, right? We don't want you to become a financial expert, but you need to have this basic knowledge. because without this basic knowledge, you are not going to be able to participate to society and even do the most basic financial decisions. And this is why I think this is also very important for wealth inequality and frankly for citizenship as well, right? People are asked to vote on topics that I don't think they understand given the evidence I've reported.
Okay, any other question? I have a question. When I think that your speech was very interesting, and the last slide was also very interesting about new investigation, new research we can do related to financial education, financial literacy. And one of them, the last one was about macroeconomics, the relationship between macroeconomics. And when you we showed the data of Spain, it was interesting because Spain was very low, has a very low classification, except on inflation. The inflation question was like the average. And I was thinking, I mean, we need a research about that. But I was thinking that perhaps because in Spain we have more inflation problems, then people know about that because they have to know.
Yeah.
But in the other things about investing and this, so perhaps there is a relationship between the macroeconomics of a country and how people react with their financial education.
Yes, very much so. Actually, we did a global survey in 2014. I wasn't able to talk about this in my presentation, but now we have data. We have collected data, even though now it's dated, on financial literacy around the world. And what we do find is what you have mentioned, which is countries that, for example, experience hyperinflation. So, for example, the Latin American countries or the Eastern European countries, and we see this also in the special issue I've published in 2023, that countries that went through high inflation, they know more about it. And, so there is a possibility to learn, of course, because you have experienced it, right? And that's another way in which people learn. Again, if we learn by experience, though, right, this might be a very inefficient learning, right? Because then we have to experience something. And the first time we experience it, we are learning. So in my view, there is a better way of learning rather than going through the experience, but certainly that's what we see in the data as well. I want to mention, though, another way in which financial literacy can affect the macroeconomy, which is via the transmission of monetary policy, right? I mean, the central bank, will affect monetary policy or like the condition of an economy by changing the interest rate, right? And, we expect that there is an effect on the economy when the interest rate change. And what we show is that people with low financial literacy are much less likely to have a reaction to the interest rate. They are much less sensitive to the interest rate and document that, financial literacy is also important for the transmission of monetary policy. And this is why a lot of central bankers now, including President Lagarde, is interested in financial literacy because that really has to do with the mandate of the central bank.
Yes.
Okay, Anna, any other question? No? So, just to say again, thank you for your excellent presentation. I hope that your presentation encouraged people in Spain to work in the field of financial literacy. I'm working on it, and I hope with other colleagues and with Luis, for example, and we need more people studying, especially I think one of the fields is not developed enough, is about the evaluation of the experiences of financial education. We at this
Yeah.
moment are working in this field, trying to evaluate the impact of some teaching experiences to young people in Spain. And so I delight to know that you in Stanford, you are promoting the debate between people, researchers who are very interested on this and wide the knowledge about this special education competence that I agree absolutely with you that is very necessary, not only in the investment field, but also to protect people from the some bank practice that are not very honest from some of the suppliers of finance. And we have we must remember the sad experience in the 2028, the crisis, the financial crisis. And in Spain, we have had some bad experience with suppliers of very dangerous financial products, like we call the preferentes, to people who were not the correct profile to sell this kind of product. So I think it's very necessary to empower people from the young to be able to understand what they are buying when they invest, and what kind of suppliers are they can be confident, they can be truly honest suppliers, and what of them are not. Okay, I'm sorry for not my expressions. Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's, I mean, I think is what we see in the US as well, right? We want financial literacy also for better protection, right, of people. And, of course, we need, a good regulation, but also, people with more knowledge can also better protect themselves against, against the financial system that might offer them products that are not suitable to their needs. So,
yeah. So, we close this plenary session, and again, thank you very much. We have enjoyed very much your presentation, and we hope to have the opportunity to meet you in person in another conference or in another scientific environment.
yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And as I've mentioned, if anybody would like an invitation to come to Stanford for the conference, we will be very happy to have you here at the conference as well. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye-bye.
Voy a detener